I won $9.1 million and set a trap for my greedy kids. Here's why. I'm telling you this story from Portugal, where the sun actually feels warm and the ocean doesn't smell like industrial runoff. But 2 months ago, I was still in Albany, New York, living in a dump that smelled like someone's wet dog had died in the walls. The landlord kept promising to fix the mold situation. He never did. I stopped asking after the third time because, honestly, what was the point? The rent was cheap, and cheap was all I could afford on a warehouse worker's salary. My truck, a 1998 Ford F-150 with a rusted-out left fender that looked like someone had taken a cheese grater to it, sat in the parking lot like a monument to better days. That truck, and I had history. I bought it new, back when I had a house and a family and a life that made sense. Now, the engine rattled when I started it, and the passenger door only opened from the inside, but it got me to work and back. That was enough. I worked the night shift at a distribution center off Route 9. Boxes, pallets, forklifts, the kind of work that makes your back hurt and your mind go numb, which was exactly what I needed. 10 hours of moving other people's stuff from point A to point B, then home to my moldy apartment, sleep for 6 hours, and do it all over again. I spent about $2,000 a month. Rent was $1,200. Food, maybe $500 if I splurged on occasional rotisserie chicken from Price Chopper instead of ramen. Gas, utilities, the basics. Nothing fancy. Nothing extra. What I didn't tell anyone, not even my co-workers who sometimes asked why I looked so tired, was that I had $9,100,000 sitting in a bank account. 2 months earlier, I had won the Powerball. The ticket was in a safety deposit box at Key Bank on Central Avenue. I hadn't touched the money except to pay the taxes and set up the account. I kept working my shifts, kept driving my rust bucket, kept eating cheap pasta and canned soup. Because the moment I changed anything, the moment I bought a new car or moved to a better place, people would know. And I wasn't ready for people to know. When I went to the bank to put the ticket in the box, there were business cards on the counter, financial advisors, estate planners, fiduciary consultants. I'd taken one, shoved it in my wallet without really looking at it, just in case. I'm a logistics guy. You always plan the route before you load the truck, especially not my kids. 5 years ago, when Allison and I divorced, I did something that everyone told me was stupid. I signed a quitclaim deed and gave her the house. The whole house. A 3-bedroom colonial in Loudonville worth $600,000, with a 2-car garage and a backyard big enough for a playset and a garden. I walked away with one suitcase, my truck, and clothes on my back. People asked me why. My lawyer asked me why. My brother asked me why, in a voice that suggested I'd lost my mind. I did it for Josh and Sarah, my kids. I wanted them to have stability, to have a roof over their heads, to not feel like their child at home was being ripped apart along with their family. I figured if I took the hit, if I was the one who sacrificed, they'd understand that I loved them more than I loved anything else in the world. I thought I was being the ultimate provider. Turns out, I was just being a fool. Josh is 28 now. He's got an MBA from University at Albany and a job at some tech startup in Brooklyn that I'm pretty sure doesn't actually make anything. He talks a lot about disruption and synergy and other words that sound impressive but mean nothing. When I listen to him, I think of damaged freight. Lots of labels on the box, impressive branding. But when you open it up, there's nothing inside that matches a description on the packing slip. The last time I asked him to help me move an old wardrobe from my apartment to a storage unit, he told me he had plans with friends. It was a Tuesday afternoon. He lived 40 minutes away. The wardrobe sat in my apartment for another 6 months until I paid 2 guys from Craigslist $50 to haul it out. Sarah is 25. She works in marketing, which as far as I can tell means she posts things on Instagram and calls it a career. She's pretty and charming and has her mother's talent for making you feel like you're the most important person in the room, right up until you're not. In my line of work, we call that mislabeling. The package says fragile, handle with care, but inside it's just styrofoam and broken promises. The last time Sarah called me was 6 months ago. She needed money for a security deposit on a new apartment in Manhattan. I sent her $1,500. She said she'd pay me back. She never did. She also never called to say thank you, or to ask how I was doing, or to acknowledge that I existed. When you work nights, you lose track of time. Days blur together. I come home at 7 in the morning, when normal people were drinking coffee and heading to their offices, and I collapse into bed with the windows blacked out and the sound of traffic humming in the background. I'd wake up around 2 in the afternoon, make myself something to eat, stare at the TV for a couple of hours, then head back to work. It was a lonely life. But loneliness was better than the alternative, which was being surrounded by people who only wanted something from you. I learned that lesson the hard way. The New York Lottery has a rule. If you win more than a certain amount, they publish your name. It's public record. They say it's for transparency, to prove that real people actually win and the whole thing isn't rigged. I knew this going in. I knew that the moment I claimed the prize, my name would be out there for everyone to see. I did it anyway, because what choice did I have? You can't just leave $9 million on the table. The press release went out on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone was ringing. Not Josh, not Sarah. A guy I worked with 10 years ago at a different warehouse wanted to know if I'd invest in his cousin's food truck business. A woman I went on 2 dates with in 2019 suddenly remembered how much she'd enjoyed my company. My landlord, who hadn't fixed a mold in 18 months, called to ask if I was planning to renew my lease and mentioned that he'd be willing to offer me a discount if I paid a year up front. But Josh and Sarah? Silence. For 3 hours, I heard nothing. I started to think that maybe, just maybe, they hadn't seen the news. Maybe they were busy with their lives and didn't spend their afternoon scrolling through local news websites looking for something to care about. Then my neighbor knocked on my door. His name is Ray, and he's one of those guys who knows everyone's business because he's always outside smoking cigarettes and watching the world go by. Ray was holding his phone, grinning like he'd just won the lottery himself. He told me he'd seen my name on ABC7. He showed me the screen. There it was. My face, my name, and the words $9 million in a font that seemed way too big and way too loud. They'd used my photo for my driver's license, the one where I looked tired and 40 pounds heavier, back when I still thought things might get better. I'd hoped nobody would recognize that worn-out guy as a millionaire. I was wrong. Ray clapped me on the shoulder and said I was a lucky son of a gun. He asked if I was going to buy a mansion. I told him I didn't know. I thanked him and closed the door. Then I sat down on my couch, which smelled faintly of mildew and old pizza, and waited. They showed up an hour later. I heard the knock before I saw them. 3 sharp raps, the kind of knock that says we're here and we're not leaving. I looked through the peephole and saw Josh and Sarah standing in the hallway, both of them smiling like they were in a toothpaste commercial. Josh was holding a pizza box. I opened the door. The smell hit me first. Cheap pepperoni pizza from one of those chain places that sells 2-for-1 deals on Tuesdays. The grease had already soaked to the bottom of the box, leaving dark spots on the cardboard. It smelled like melted plastic and fake cheese and something else, something I couldn't quite name. Desperation, maybe, or calculation. Josh was wearing a button-down shirt and khakis, like he'd just come from a business meeting. Sarah had on a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. They both looked polished, put together. Ready? Josh spoke first. He said it was so good to see me. He said he couldn't believe the news. He said he'd tried calling, but my phone must have been off. It wasn't. I checked. No missed calls. Sarah hugged me. She squeezed tight, her perfume overwhelming in the small space, and told me she was so happy for me, that I deserved this, that I'd worked so hard for so long and finally something good had happened. I didn't move. I stood there like a statue, my arms at my sides, while Sarah hugged me and Josh set the pizza box down on my kitchen counter, which was cluttered with dirty dishes and unopened mail. They were talking fast, too fast, asking questions that didn't need answers. How did it feel? What was I going to do with the money? Had I thought about investing? Did I have a financial advisor? Josh suggested we sit down and talk. He said he had some ideas, that his MBA had taught him a lot about wealth management and portfolio diversification, and he'd be happy to help me figure out a plan. Sarah chimed in. She said we should celebrate. She said we were family, and family sticks together, and this was a new chapter for all of us. I let them talk. I nodded in the right places. I opened the pizza box and took a slice, even though I wasn't hungry. The cheese was rubbery, and the sauce tasted like ketchup with oregano. I chewed slowly, watching them. Josh asked if I'd hired a lawyer yet. He suggested his friend Marcus, who apparently knew a guy who specialized in lottery winners. Sarah asked if I thought about buying a bigger place, maybe something in a nicer neighborhood, somewhere they could visit more often. Visit more often. That was rich. Sarah hadn't visited me once in the 6 months since she'd borrowed $1,500. They stayed for 2 hours. 2 hours of smiles and laughter and plans for a future that suddenly included them in ways it never had before. Josh offered to help me move out of the apartment, to find a real estate agent, to set up meetings with financial advisors. Sarah said she'd help me decorate, that she had great taste and knew all the best furniture stores. I listened. I smiled. I played along. But inside, something cold and hard was settling into place. See, here's the thing about people. You can know them your whole life, raise them, feed them, sacrifice everything for them, and still not really know them until money enters the picture. Money is a truth serum. It strips away the pretense and the politeness and shows you exactly what someone is made of. Josh and Sarah weren't here because they loved me. They weren't here because they'd miss me or because they wanted to reconnect. They were here because $9 million had just entered my life, and they wanted their share. I thought about the house, the $600,000 house I'd signed over to their mother, so they'd have a place to grow up. I thought about the years I'd spent in cheap apartments, eating cheap food, driving a truck that barely ran, because every extra dollar went toward child support and their college tuition and making sure they had everything they needed. I thought about the wardrobe. The Tuesday afternoon Josh couldn't spare 40 minutes to help his old man. I thought about Sarah's phone calls, or rather, the lack of them. Josh was talking about something called a revocable living trust. He was explaining how it would protect my assets, how it would minimize taxes, how it would ensure that the money stayed in the family. He kept saying the word family like it was a magic incantation, like if he said it enough times I'd forget that he'd ignore me for 3 years. Sarah was nodding along, adding little comments about how smart Josh was, how lucky I was to have a son with an MBA, how we could all work together to make sure this money lasted. And I realized something. They'd already spent it. In their minds, my $9 million was already theirs. They'd already divided it up, already planned what they'd buy, already figured out how to squeeze me out of my own life. When they finally left, sometime after 10 o'clock at night, they hugged me again. Josh clapped me on the back and told me to think about what he'd said. Sarah kissed my cheek and told me to call her tomorrow, that we had so much to talk about. I closed the door behind them and stood in my apartment, which still smelled like mold and cheap pizza. The grease-stained box sat on my counter, 3 slices left inside. I picked it up and threw in the trash. $10 bribery. That's what it was. $10 worth of pepperoni pizza from a chain restaurant, delivered with smiles and hugs and empty promises. I walked over the window and looked out at the parking lot. My F-150 was there, rusted and dented and faithful as ever. Josh's car, a leased BMW that probably cost more per month than my rent, was pulling out onto the street. I watched the taillights disappear into the distance. For the first time in 5 years, I felt something other than regret or loneliness. I felt clarity. See, I'd spent half a decade blaming myself for the divorce, wondering if I'd done enough, given enough, been enough, wondering if the reason my kids didn't call was because I'd failed them somehow, because I wasn't the father they deserved. But standing there in my crappy apartment, with the smell of cheap pizza lingering in the air and the sound of my neighbor's TV bleeding to the walls, I understood. It wasn't me. It never had been. Josh and Sarah hadn't called because they didn't need me. And now that I had something they wanted, they were back. Not because they loved me, because they loved my money. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water from the tap. It tasted faintly metallic, like old pipes and neglect. I drank it anyway. Tomorrow, I'd go back to work. I'd load boxes and drive forklifts and pretend like nothing had changed. But something had changed. I'd seen the truth. I'd seen their faces when they looked at me, and I'd seen what was behind their smiles. The next morning, I'd call a lawyer, not Josh's friend Marcus, a real lawyer, someone who didn't owe anybody anything, and I'd start making plans. Not the kind of plans Josh and Sarah had in mind, the kind of plans that would teach them a lesson they'd never forget. Because here's what I learned, sitting in that apartment with the mold and the rust and the weight of 5 years pressing down on me. You can't buy love, but you can damn sure find out who never loved you in the first place. And sometimes that's the most valuable thing money can buy. 3 days later, I'd meet Amber Vance. But I didn't know that yet. Right now, standing in my apartment with the door closed and the silence pressing in, I was just a man who'd finally opened his eyes. I opened the door, and Josh tries to hug me for the first time in 3 years. His arms reach out, that fake smile plastered on his face like he's posing for a Christmas card. I stand perfectly still, my arms at my sides, a statue made of disappointment and clarity. The smell of $10 bribery pizza fills my apartment. I've already figured it all out. 3 days later, I'm sitting in my Ford F-150 in the parking lot of Dunkin' Donuts on Wolf Road, and my hands smell like motor oil and old leather. The truck's heater is broken, has been for 2 years, so I'm wearing the same work jacket I wore during my shift that ended 4 hours ago. My fingers are stiff from a cold as I pull out my wallet. The business card is right where I left it, wedged between an expired CVS Rewards card and a receipt from Stewart's that's so faded I can't even read the date anymore. Amber Vance, CFP, Fiduciary Wealth Management. There's a phone number and an address downtown, one of those glass buildings near the Capitol that always looks like it costs more to clean the windows than I make in a month. I kept working my shifts, all 3 nights, loading pallets, scanning barcodes, pretending like nothing had changed. My supervisor asked me if I was feeling okay because I'd been quieter than usual. I told him I was fine, just tired. He bought it. People always buy it when you tell them you're tired. It's the most American excuse in existence. But I wasn't tired. I was calculating. The morning after Josh and Sarah left with their greasy pizza box, I drove to Best Buy on Central Avenue, paid cash for a Ring doorbell camera and a dash cam with audio recording. $240 total. The kid at the register asked if I wanted the extended warranty. I said no. I didn't need these things to last forever, just long enough to catch what I needed to catch. In logistics, you learn pretty fast that timing is everything. You can have the best product in the world, but if you deliver to the wrong place at the wrong time, it's worthless, sometimes even dangerous. Josh and Sarah had made their move too early. They'd shown their hand before they understood what game we were playing. That gave me the advantage. I'd spent 3 days thinking about that pizza, the cheap pepperoni smell that still lingered in my apartment even after I'd taken the trash out, the way Josh's smile didn't reach his eyes, the way Sarah hugged me like she was trying to squeeze money out of my pockets. $10 bribery. That's all I was worth to them. Now it was time to see what they'd do when the stakes got higher. I call the number on the card. A woman answers on the second ring. Professional voice, warm but not fake. I tell her I'm interested in speaking with Ms. Vance about financial planning. She asks if I'm a current client. I say no, but I recently came into some money, and I need help managing it. There's a pause. Then she asks how much money we're talking about. I tell her $9 million. The pause gets longer. Then she tells me Ms. Vance can see me this afternoon at 2 o'clock if I'm available. I look at my watch. It's 11:30. I tell her I'll be there. The drive downtown takes 20 minutes. My truck makes a sound like a dying cat every time I shift into third gear, and the passenger side mirror is held on with duct tape. But it gets me where I need to go. I park in a garage that charges $15 for 2 hours. $15. I remember when that used to feel like a lot of money. Now it's pocket change. Funny how perspective shifts. The building is exactly what I expected. Glass and steel, and that corporate cleanliness that makes you feel like you should have worn better shoes. The lobby has marble floors and a security desk with a guy in a uniform who looks like he's never done a day of manual labor in his life. I sign in, get a visitor badge, and take the elevator to the 12th floor. Amber Vance's office has a view of a city that probably costs more in rent than my entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture. Everything is white or gray or some color that rich people have a fancy name for, but the rest of us just call beige. Amber herself is not what I expected. I'd imagined someone older, someone who looked like they'd spent decades managing other people's money. But she's 30, maybe 31, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and eyes that don't miss anything. She's wearing a blazer and slacks that probably cost more than my truck, but she doesn't wear them like she's trying to impress anyone. She wears them like armor, professional, competent, beautiful in the way that makes men stupid and women jealous. Perfect. She shakes my hand. Her grip is firm. She offers me coffee. I decline. We sit down at her desk, and she pulls out a legal pad and a pen that probably costs more than my weekly grocery bill. She asks me about my situation. I tell her the truth. Won the Powerball 2 months ago. $9.1 million after taxes. Currently working nights at a warehouse because I don't trust anyone, and I needed time to figure out what to do next. She doesn't blink, doesn't act surprised or impressed, or any of the things most people do when you tell them you're a millionaire. She just nods and starts taking notes. She asks about my family situation. I tell her I'm divorced. 2 adult children. Minimal contact until the news broke. Then suddenly they're very interested in reconnecting. She asks if I've told them about my plans for the money. I say no. I haven't made any plans yet. That's why I'm here. She sets down her pen and looks at me directly. She tells me she needs to be honest. Most lottery winners lose everything within 5 years. Not because they spend it stupidly, though some do, but because people come out of the woodwork. Family, friends, strangers. Everyone wants a piece. And most winners feel obligated to give it to them because they feel guilty about having money when others don't. She asked me if I feel guilty. I think about the house I signed over to Allison, the child support I paid for years, the college tuition, the security deposit for Sarah's apartment. I tell her no, I don't feel guilty at all. She smiles. It's a small smile, professional, but there's something behind it that tells me she's dealt with family drama before. She tells me she can help me, but only if I'm willing to do exactly what she says. No exceptions, no creative interpretations. Because the moment I start making emotional decisions, we've lost. I tell her I'm a logistics guy. I follow protocols. I understand chain of command. She nods. Then she tells me we're going to build a fortress. The plan is simple. Beautiful, even. Amber explains it like she's describing a shipping route, and I understand every word. First, we move the money into a series of trusts, irrevocable trusts. The kind where even I can't touch the principal without triggering penalties. The trust will pay me a monthly income, enough to live comfortably but not extravagantly. Everything else gets locked down tight. Second, we establish a fiduciary relationship. She's not just my financial advisor. She's my fiduciary, which means she's legally obligated to act in my best interest. If anyone tries to claim she's manipulating me or taking advantage, there's a paper trail a mile long that proves otherwise. Third, and this is the part one like best, we make it visible. We don't hide. We let Josh and Sarah see exactly what's happening. Because the best way to catch someone doing something stupid is to give them enough rope to hang themselves. I ask her what she means by visible. She leans back in her chair. She tells me people make assumptions. If they see me spending money on her, they'll assume she's taking advantage of me. They'll assume I'm being manipulated. And if they're stupid enough to act on those assumptions, they'll do something illegal. And when they do, we'll have evidence. I sit there in that expensive office with the view of Albany spread out below us, and I realize I'm talking to someone who understands the game better than I do. I ask her how much this is going to cost. She tells me her fee structure. 1% of assets under management annually. For $9 million, that's $90,000 a year. It sounds like a lot until she explains that she's not just managing money. She's managing risk. She's managing people. She's managing the legal minefield that comes with sudden wealth. I tell her I'll do it. We spend the next 2 hours signing paperwork. Trusts, power of attorney documents, investment strategies. It's boring and tedious, and exactly the kind of thing that makes most people's eyes glaze over. But I read every word. I ask questions. I make sure I understand exactly what I'm agreeing to. When we're done, Amber walks me to the door. She tells me to expect some pushback from my family. They're not going to like this arrangement. They're going to tell me I'm making a mistake. They might even try to turn me against her. I tell her I'm counting on it. The next morning, my phone rings. It's Allison. I haven't spoken to my ex-wife in 2 years. Not since the divorce was finalized and she got the house and I got my freedom. But now she's calling, and her voice has that particular tone that used to make me do whatever she wanted just to make it stop. She tells me she heard I hired a financial advisor. She heard it's a young woman. She wants to know if I've lost my mind. I asked her where she heard that. She says Josh told her. Josh is worried. Sarah is worried. They're concerned that this woman is going to take advantage of me, that I'm vulnerable and making poor decisions. I let her talk. I don't interrupt. I learned a long time ago that Allison likes the sound of her own voice, and if you let her go long enough, she'll eventually reveal what she really wants. Finally, she gets to the point. She thinks I should let Josh manage the money. He has an MBA after all. He works in finance. He knows what he's doing. And he's family. You can trust family. I almost laugh, but I don't. Instead, I tell her that's exactly why I hired professional. Because family gets emotional. Family makes mistakes. Family thinks they're entitled to things that aren't theirs. There's a long silence on the other end of the line. Then she tells me I'm being selfish, that I'm putting myself before my children, that they're struggling and could use help, and here I am hiring some expensive woman to tell me what to do with money that should be going to my family. I tell her the conversation is over. I hang up. My hands are shaking, not from anger, from something else. Relief, maybe, or vindication. Because for the first time in 20 years, I just told Allison no, and I didn't apologize for it. 2 weeks later, I buy Amber a car. It's a business decision. She needs to meet with clients all over the capital region, and her current car is a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a broken air conditioner. I need her focused on managing my money, not worrying about whether her car is going to break down on I-87. So I propose buying her a Tesla Model S, $90,000. Black, sleek, professional. She says no. Not just no. Hell no. She explains that accepting a $90,000 gift from a client would violate every fiduciary standard in existence. The state licensing board would suspend her. Her professional reputation would be destroyed. She'd lose everything she'd built. I tell her it's not a gift. It's a business expense. She says it doesn't matter. The optics are terrible. Anyone looking at our arrangement would assume she's taking advantage of me. That's when I smile. I tell her that's exactly the point. We spend 3 days with lawyers. Real lawyers, not Josh's friend Marcus. We draft a commercial lease agreement. The Tesla is titled to my LLC, not to her personally. She leases it from me for $1 per year. The contract specifies it's a company vehicle for business use only. There are mileage logs, insurance through her firm, everything documented down to the penny. When we're done, the arrangement is completely legal and completely ironclad. Amber owns nothing. She's simply using an asset that belongs to me, under terms that would hold up in any court in the country. But to anyone watching from the outside, especially people who don't understand how business vehicles work, it looks like I just bought my 30-year-old financial advisor a luxury car. Amber understands what I'm doing. She asks me if I'm sure, if I'm really ready to use myself as bait. I tell her I've been bait my whole life. At least now I get to choose a trap. Josh shows up at my apartment 3 days after the Tesla gets delivered. He doesn't call first. He just appears at my door at 7 in the evening, when I'm making myself dinner. Spaghetti with Jared sauce. Some things don't change even when you're a millionaire. He comes in without asking. Starts pacing around my tiny living room like he owns the place. He tells me we need to talk. He tells me he's worried about me. He tells me that buying a $90,000 car for some woman I barely know is insane. I don't say anything. I just stir my pasta and wait for him to get to the real point. Finally, he does. He says Mom is right. This woman is using me. She's probably got me signing documents I don't understand, probably setting things up so she can drain the account and disappear. He says I need to fire her immediately and let him take over. He can protect me. He knows people. He knows how this works. I turn off the stove. I drain the pasta. I put it in a bowl and sit down at my kitchen table. I tell Josh to sit down. He doesn't want to sit. He wants to keep pacing, keep talking, keep trying to convince me that I'm an idiot who doesn't know what he's doing. I tell him again, sit down. He sits. I eat my spaghetti. It's overcooked and the sauce tastes like tin, but I eat it anyway because I'm hungry and because I want Josh to sit there and watch me not give a damn about his opinion. When I'm done, I tell him 3 things. 1, Amber Vance is a licensed fiduciary. Everything she does is regulated and documented. 2, the Tesla is a business expense, not a gift. I showed him the paperwork, if he wants to see it. 3, his concern is noted and dismissed. I'm a grown man. I don't need his permission or his approval. Then I tell him to leave. He doesn't leave quietly. He tells me I'm going to regret this. He tells me I'm being manipulated. He tells me that when this all falls apart, I shouldn't come crying to him for help. I don't respond. I just open the door and wait. He leaves. The door slams hard enough to rattle the frame. I sit back down at my table, finish my water, look around my moldy apartment with its cheap furniture and its broken heater, and I smile because Josh just did exactly what I needed him to do. He showed his hand. He revealed that this isn't about protecting me. It's about controlling my money. Now I just need to wait for him to make the next move. I'd installed the Ring camera above my door the day after I bought it. The dash cam went into my truck the same afternoon. I'm not paranoid. I'm prepared. There's a difference. The Ring camera caught everything. Josh's visit, his pacing, his anger. But more importantly, it caught what happened after he left. Sarah showed up 30 minutes later. She and Josh stood in the hallway outside my door, thinking I couldn't hear them. But the camera has a microphone, and it picked up every word. Sarah asked Josh what happened. Josh told her I wouldn't listen, that I was being stubborn, that the woman had her claws in deep. Sarah said they needed to do something. They couldn't just sit around and watch this woman steal everything. Josh agreed. He said they needed to move fast. Before Amber convinced me to change my will or sign over power of attorney or do something else irreversible. Then Sarah said something that made my blood run cold. She said Mom found a doctor, some guy named Miller. He'd be willing to sign paperwork, saying I wasn't mentally competent, early-stage dementia, emotional instability, whatever they needed. It would cost $5,000, but it would be worth it. Josh asked if that would hold up in court. Sarah said it didn't matter. Once they had the paperwork, they could petition for power of attorney. Even if I fought it, the process would take months. By then, they have control of the accounts and could freeze Amber out. Josh asked what happens if I refuse to see the doctor. Sarah laughed. She said I wouldn't have a choice. They'd show up with the doctor, tell me it's just a routine checkup, something the insurance company requires for lottery winners. I'd never know what was really happening until it was too late. Then she said something else. Something that made me glad. I was sitting down when I listened to the recording later. She said she didn't care about me. She just wanted the villa in Portugal I'd been talking about. That I was old, that I didn't need much, that a room in some assisted living facility would be plenty good enough for someone like me. I'd mentioned Portugal exactly once. That night with the pizza, when they asked what I was going to do with the money, I'd said something about maybe retiring somewhere warm, somewhere by the ocean, maybe Cascais. I'd seen pictures online. It looked peaceful. That was it. One sentence. One throwaway comment about a dream I'd had for 30 years. And apparently, that was the only part of the conversation Sarah actually heard. Not the part where I was her father. Not the part where I'd given up everything for her and her brother. Just the part about the villa. She didn't want me to have it. She wanted to have it. While I rotted in some nursing home, drugged up and forgotten. Josh didn't disagree. He just asked when they could set it up. Sarah said she'd call Mom in the morning. Then they left. I sat in my apartment, listening to that recording 3 times, making sure I heard it right, making sure I understood exactly what my children, the 2 people I'd sacrificed everything for, were planning to do to me. They were going to have me declared incompetent using a bribe doctor. They were going to steal my power of attorney. They were going to lock me in a nursing home and take my money. And they'd been planning this with their mother, the woman I'd given a $600,000 house to because I wanted my kids to have a stable home. I forwarded the audio file to Amber. No explanation, just a file. She called me 10 minutes later. Her voice was different, cold, professional in a way that made me think she'd dealt with this kind of thing before. She told me to not delete anything, to make backup copies of all the recordings, to document every interaction with Josh, Sarah, and Allison from this point forward. She told me she was going to start building a file, evidence, documentation, everything we'd need if this went to court. Then she told me something else, something that made me realize I'd hired exactly the right person. She said my children had just committed conspiracy to commit fraud, that if they actually tried to get me declared incompetent using a bribed physician, they could face criminal charges, that we could not only protect my money, we could make sure they never got another dollar from me again. I asked her what the next step was. She said we wait. We let them try, because catching them in the act is worth more than stopping them before they start. 3 days later, Allison called again. She said she wanted to meet, just the 2 of us, to talk about the kids and their concerns. I agreed to meet her for coffee. She suggested a Starbucks near the Crossgates Mall. I showed up 15 minutes early and sat in a corner booth where I could see the door. Old habit from my logistics days. Always know your exits. Allison arrived 10 minutes late. She looked good, better than she had when we were married. New haircut, expensive coat. I wondered if she was spending the equity from a house on herself or if she'd found someone else to fund her lifestyle. She sat down and ordered a latte that cost $7. She didn't offer to buy me anything. She started with small talk, asked about my health, asked about work, asked if I was still in that apartment on Central Avenue. I answered everything with single words. Yes, fine, yes. Finally, she got to the point. She said Josh and Sarah were really worried, that they felt like I was pushing them away, that this financial advisor was coming between us as a family. I asked her if Josh told her about the Tesla. She said yes. She said it was inappropriate, extravagant, a sign that I wasn't thinking clearly. I asked her if she thought I was thinking clearly when I signed over the house. Her face changed. The fake concern disappeared, replaced by something harder. She said that was different. That was for the kids. I said this is also for the kids. I'm making sure they learn a valuable lesson about entitlement and consequences. She leaned forward. Her voice dropped. She told me I was making a mistake. That families stick together. That I was going to regret pushing them away over money. I told her I already regretted 20 years of letting people walk all over me because I was afraid of being alone. She didn't have an answer for that. I stood up. I told her this conversation was over. I told her that if Josh or Sarah wanted to talk to me, they could call me themselves instead of sending their mother to manipulate me. Then I left. 2 weeks after that, I got a notification from my bank. Someone had attempted to access my account using forged power of attorney documents. The attempt was denied because Amber had already flagged my account with special security protocols. But the bank kept a record of who made the attempt. It was Josh. He'd used Allison's name, forged her signature, claimed she had power of attorney over my medical and financial decisions due to my diminished capacity. In logistics, we have a term for cargo that damages itself in transit, self-destructive load. It happens when the contents shift wrong, when the packaging fails, when the weight distribution is off. The cargo destroys itself before it ever reaches the destination. That's what Josh was doing, self-destructing. And I was just documenting the damage. This wasn't anger I was feeling. It was something colder, more professional. Like watching a shipment you knew was going to fail because someone ignored the weight limits and loaded it wrong. You warned them. They didn't listen. Now you're just filling out the incident report. Forgery is a felony in New York. Class D, punishable by up to 7 years in prison. Josh had just committed a crime, using his mother's identity, attempting to steal from his father. All documented, all time-stamped, all saved in a folder that was growing thicker by the day. The bank called me directly, asked if I knew about this, asked if I wanted to file a police report. I told them no, not yet, but I wanted copies of everything, every document, every attempt, every piece of evidence. They sent me a PDF within an hour. I forwarded it to Amber. I'm sitting in my apartment now, looking at my laptop screen. The bank statement is open in one tab. The forged documents are open in another. The audio recording from the Ring camera is saved in a folder on my desktop labeled Evidence. Josh tried to steal my money using his mother's name. My son, the one with the MBA, the one who said he wanted to protect me. He tried to rob me. I look at the screen. I look at the evidence. I think about the house and the child support and the years of sacrifice. I think about the pizza, the $10 bribery. I think about Sarah saying she doesn't care about me, that she just wants my villa, that a nursing home room would be good enough for someone like me. And I realized something. This isn't about money anymore. It never really was. This is about truth, about seeing people for who they really are. And now I see them perfectly clearly. I close the laptop. Tomorrow, I'll call Amber. We'll finalize the next phase of the plan. But tonight, I'm just going to sit here in my moldy apartment with my overcooked pasta and my broken heater. And I'm going to appreciate the fact that I finally understand what's really happening. I look at the bank statement on my screen. Josh tried to steal my money using his mother's name. Time to start the game. I close the laptop and sit in the dark for a long time. The apartment is quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my upstairs neighbor walking around. Outside, a car alarm goes off and then stops. Someone laughs in the parking lot. Life continues like nothing has changed. But everything has changed. Tomorrow morning, I'll drive to Amber's office. We'll file a response to the lawsuit Josh and Sarah filed 3 weeks ago. The one claiming I'm mentally incompetent. The one requesting emergency guardianship and power of attorney. The one that's going to blow up in their faces so spectacularly that they'll wish they just walked away when they had the chance. Tonight, I'm just a man in a moldy apartment, looking at evidence of my children's betrayal, feeling nothing but a cold, professional satisfaction that the pieces are finally in place. In logistics, we call this the final mile, the last stretch before delivery. Everything's been loaded. The route's been planned. All that's left is to execute. The courthouse is downtown, a gray stone building that looks like it was designed to intimidate people into telling the truth. I park my F 153 blocks away because parking garages downtown charge $20, and I'm still not used to spending money on things like convenience. It's early April, cold enough that I'm wearing the same work jacket I've worn for 5 years, the one with the oil stain on the left sleeve that never quite came out. Under it, I've got on my only dress shirt and a tie I bought at Walmart for $12. I look like exactly what I am, a warehouse worker who can't afford better clothes. Josh and Sarah are already inside when I arrive. I see them through the glass doors, standing in the hallway with their mother. Josh is wearing a suit that probably costs more than my monthly rent. Sarah's got on a dress and heels that look like they came straight from some boutique in Manhattan. Allison is carrying a designer handbag I recognize from a commercial I saw once. Coach, maybe, or Michael Kors. Something with a name that means expensive. They look successful, polished, like the kind of people who deserve to be in charge of $9 million. I look like their poor father, who clearly can't be trusted with money. Perfect. Amber meets me at the security checkpoint. She's wearing a charcoal gray suit and carrying a leather briefcase that's scuffed at the corners from actual use, not for show. She nods at me but doesn't smile. This is business now. We walk to the courtroom together. Our footsteps echo in the marble hallway. The building smells like floor polish and old paper, and the particular kind of stress that comes from people fighting over things that matter. Josh sees me. He says something to Sarah. They both turn and stare. I don't look away. I don't wave. I just walk past them like they're strangers I might see on the subway, because that's what they are now. People I used to know who turn out to be someone else entirely. Allison tries to catch my eye. She's got a tissue in her hand, though her eyes are completely dry. She's practiced this look. The concerned ex-wife, the worried mother, the woman who just wants what's best for everyone. I've seen that look before. For 20 years of marriage, I saw that look every time she wanted something and knew that playing the victim was the fastest way to get it. Not anymore. The courtroom is smaller than you see on TV. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, uncomfortable benches that make you feel like you're in church. The judge's bench sits at the front, elevated, like a stage for a play where everyone knows their lines except the audience. Judge Patricia Morrison presides. She's in her 60s, gray hair pulled back tight, glasses that make her eyes look bigger than they are. She's got a reputation for not tolerating nonsense. Amber told me that's why she requested this specific courtroom. Judge Morrison has zero patience for people who waste the court's time with frivolous lawsuits. We sit at the defendant's table. Josh, Sarah, and Allison sit behind their attorney at the plaintiff's table. Their lawyer is a guy named Richard Chun, mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of lawyer who takes cases where there's money to be made and doesn't ask too many questions about whether his clients are telling the truth. Judge Morrison calls the case. The clerk reads the docket number. It sounds official and impersonal, like we're dealing with a shipping invoice instead of a family tearing itself apart. Chin stands up. He's good. I'll give him that. He speaks clearly, makes eye contact with the judge, uses terms like cognitive decline and fiduciary responsibility and best interests of the respondent. He makes it sound like Josh and Sarah are heroes trying to save their poor, confused father from making terrible mistakes. He presents his evidence. Medical documentation from Dr. Gerald Miller, a licensed physician who examined me and determined that I'm showing early signs of dementia, emotional instability, poor judgment, inability to manage complex financial decisions. The problem, of course, is that I never met Dr. Gerald Miller. Chin doesn't know that yet. He also presents evidence of my erratic behavior, buying a $90,000 car for a woman I barely know, giving financial control to a 30-year-old advisor with minimal experience, living in a rundown apartment despite having millions in the bank, refusing to accept help from family members who only want what's best for me. He makes me sound like a crazy old man being taken advantage of by a gold digger. Judge Morrison listens. She takes notes. She asks a few clarifying questions. She does not look impressed with Chen's presentation, but she doesn't look dismissive either. She's waiting. When Chen finishes, she asks if the petitioners wish to testify. Josh stands up. He's nervous. I can tell because he keeps adjusting his tie, a habit he's had since high school when he had to give presentations. He takes the stand. He swears to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Then he lies. He talks about how worried he is, how I've changed since winning the lottery, how I've become withdrawn and paranoid and unwilling to trust my own family. He talks about the Tesla like it's evidence of insanity instead of a business expense. He talks about Amber like she's a con artist instead of a licensed professional with a spotless record. He talks about wanting to protect me, about loving me, about how painful it is to watch his father make these kinds of mistakes. His voice cracks at the end. Real tears. Or maybe he's just that good at faking them. Sarah goes next. She's better at this than Josh. More practiced. She talks about our relationship, how close we used to be, how I used to call her every week, and now I barely respond to her messages. She makes it sound like I've abandoned my family, not the other way around. She cries. Real tears this time. But I've seen her cry before. She cried when I wouldn't increase her allowance in college. She cried when I said I couldn't afford to help with her security deposit until I'd saved up. She cries when it's useful. Allison doesn't testify. She must have decided that putting the ex-wife on the stand would be too obvious. When they're done, Judge Morrison asks if the defense wishes to respond. Amber stands up. She doesn't start with the recordings. She starts with something simpler, something that makes Chen's face go pale before she's even finished her first sentence. She presents Dr. Miller's evaluation, the one he supposedly conducted. Then she presents my medical records from my actual physician, Dr. Patricia Huang, who I've been seeing for 10 years. Dr. Huang's records show I had a routine checkup 3 weeks ago. Perfect cognitive function. No signs of dementia. No emotional instability. Then Amber presents phone records. My phone records. Showing that Dr. Miller never called me, never scheduled an appointment, never had any contact with me whatsoever. Then she presents bank records. Dr. Miller's bank records. Showing a $5,000 deposit from Josh's account 3 days before Dr. Miller signed the evaluation. Judge Morrison leans forward. She asks Chen if he'd like to explain. Chen has nothing. He looks at Josh. Josh won't meet his eyes. The courtroom is silent, except for the sound of the air conditioning and someone in the gallery shifting on a hard wooden bench. Then Amber plays a recording. She'd warned me about this part. She said it would be hard to hear. That even knowing what Josh and Sarah said, hearing out loud in a courtroom full of strangers would feel different. She was right. The audio quality is good. Ring cameras have decent microphones. You can hear everything clearly. Sarah's voice, Josh's voice, the conversation in the hallway outside my apartment door. Sarah saying she doesn't care about me, that she just wants a villa in Portugal, that I'm old and a room in an assisted living facility would be good enough. Josh agreeing, asking about the timeline, talking about the forged power of attorney like a legitimate business strategy instead of felony. The courtroom is completely silent. I can hear Sarah breathing behind me. Short, sharp breaths. Panicked breathing. When the recording ends, Judge Morrison removes her glasses. She sets them down on her desk. She looks at Josh and Sarah like there's something she scraped off her shoe. She asks if either of them would like to revise their testimony. Neither of them says anything. Then Amber presents the rest of the evidence. The private investigator's report, complete with photographs of Josh meeting Dr. Miller in a Dunkin' Donuts parking lot and handing him an envelope. The bank records showing the forged power of attorney attempt. The documentation of every lie, every manipulation, every attempt to steal from their father. Amber doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. She just presents fact after fact after fact, building a case so airtight that Chen looks like he wants to crawl under the table. When she's done, Judge Morrison asks if I'd like to make a statement. I stand up. My legs are shaking, not from fear, from something else. Relief, maybe, or grief for the children. I thought I had versus the strangers who turned out to be real. I tell the judge I gave them everything. The house, their education, 20 years of my life working jobs I hated, so they could have opportunities one never had. I signed away a $600,000 house, so they'd have a roof over their heads. I paid child support until they graduated college, even though the divorce decree only required it until they turned 18. I tell her they didn't call me for 3 years. Didn't visit. Didn't check if I was okay when I was living in an apartment that smelled like mold and eating spaghetti for dinner, because it was cheap. But the moment they found out I won the lottery, they showed up with pizza, with smiles, with plans for my money. I tell her I don't want revenge. I just want to be free. Free from the expectation that I owe them something. Free from the guilt that somehow their greed is my fault. Free from people who see me as a checkbook instead of a person. Judge Morrison is quiet for a long moment. Then she picks up her gavel. She says she's seen a lot of cases in her 30 years on the bench. But this one stands out because it's not just about money. It's about a fundamental betrayal of trust. She says a petition is not just denied. It's dismissed with prejudice, meaning it can never be filed again. She says the evidence suggests attempted fraud, conspiracy, and possibly bribery of a medical professional. She's referring the matter to the district attorney for criminal investigation. She uses the term frivolous litigation. She says Josh and Sarah are lucky she's not holding them in contempt of court. Then she looks at me. She tells me I'm free to manage my affairs however I see fit, that I've demonstrated more competence and foresight than most people she sees in her courtroom, that my children should be ashamed of themselves. The gavel comes down. The sound echoes. It's over. I stand up, straighten my cheap Walmart tie, button my work jacket with the oil stain on the sleeve. Behind me, Sarah is crying, but I know what those tears are for now. They're not for me. They're not because she's sorry. They're because she just lost $9 million and any chance of ever getting it back. Josh sits frozen. His expensive suit suddenly looks like a costume, like he dressed up as someone successful but forgot to actually become that person. Allison clutches her designer handbag. Her face is pale. Her hands are shaking. She looks like someone who just watched her entire plan collapse in real time. I don't feel sorry for any of them. I walk out of courtroom. Amber follows me. We don't say anything until we're outside on the courthouse steps, where the April sun is trying to break through the clouds. Amber asks if I'm okay. I tell her I'm better than okay. For the first time in 30 years, I'm exactly where I need to be. That was 8 months ago. Now I'm sitting on a terrace in Cascais, Portugal, and the sun is setting over the Atlantic Ocean. The sky is orange and pink and purple, colors that don't seem real, but are. The air smells like salt and grilled fish from the restaurant down the street, and the jasmine that grows on the wall next to our table. Our table, because I'm not alone. Maria is pouring wine into my glass. A Portuguese Vinho Verde that costs €6 at the supermarket and tastes better than anything I ever drank in New York. She's laughing at something I said, though I can't remember what it was. Something about how I still can't pronounce bacalhau correctly no matter how many times she corrects me. I met Maria 3 months after I moved here. I bought a small house in the old town. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a terrace, a view of the ocean if you stood on your toes and leaned over the railing. I paid cash for €100,000. Probably overpaid. Didn't care. I spent the first month doing nothing, walking along the beach, sitting in cafes, learning basic Portuguese from an app on my phone, trying to figure out who Caleb was when he wasn't loading pallets or managing other people's expectations. I bought a bicycle, not an expensive one, just a basic bike from a local shop that cost €80. I rode it to the market every morning to buy bread and fruit and coffee that came in a small paper cup and tasted like it was made by someone who actually cared. Maria worked at the library in town. I'd gone there looking for English books, and she'd helped me find the American section. We started talking. She asked where I was from. I told her. She asked what brought me to Portugal. I said I needed a change. She didn't ask about money. Didn't ask what I did for work. Didn't ask any of the questions people usually ask when they're trying to figure out if you're worth their time. She just asked if I'd tried the pastiest and nata from the bakery near the fortress. I said no. She said I was missing out on one of life's great pleasures. The next day, I went to the bakery, bought 2 pasties, brought one to the library for her. She smiled. Not the fake smile Sarah used to give me when she wanted something. A real smile, the kind that reaches your eyes and means exactly what it looks like. We got married 4 months later. Small ceremony. Just us and 2 witnesses we pulled in from the street, because Portuguese law requires it. We had lunch afterwards at a restaurant that overlooked the marina. Fish and wine and bread with olive oil. The waiter didn't ask if we were celebrating anything special. In Portugal, they don't pry. Maria knows I have money. I told her after the 3rd date, because I didn't want there to be secrets. She asked how much. I told her. She nodded and said that was good. It meant I wouldn't have to work if I didn't want to, and we could travel when we felt like it. She didn't ask for anything. Didn't suggest we buy a bigger house or a nicer car or any of the things people usually want when they find out you're rich. She just asked if I was happy. I told her I was getting there. Josh and Sarah get $2,000 a month. Each. That's what I set up in the trust before I left the country. Spendthrift Trust, Amber called it. It means they can't borrow against it, can't sell it, can't access the principal. They just get the monthly payment, electronically, deposited on the 1st of every month. $2,000. Exactly what I lived on in that moldy apartment in Albany. Exactly what they thought was enough for me. The trust as conditions. They can't contest it. They can't sue me. They can't contact me. Any violation. And the payments stop forever. The money goes to charity instead. Amber picked the charities. Animal shelters. Literacy programs. Organizations that help people who actually need help. I know Josh tried to fight it. Amber sent me an email about it. He hired a lawyer, filed a motion. The judge, a different one this time, looked at the trust documents and the evidence from the previous case and dismissed it in about 5 minutes. Sarah tried a different approach. She sent letters, emails, messages through mutual acquaintances I didn't know we had, all of them saying she was sorry, that she'd made a mistake, that she wanted to make things right. I never responded, because here's what I learned sitting in that courtroom, listening to my daughter say she didn't care about me. You can't apologize for who you are. You can only apologize for what you did. And what Sarah did came from who she is, a person who sees other people as resources to be extracted. That doesn't change just because the extraction failed. My laptop is open on the table next to the wine bottle. I check my email once a week. Habit from my logistics days. Always know what's moving, even if you're not moving it anymore. There's a message from Josh. Subject line, please read this. I hover the mouse over it. Maria notices. She asks if it's important. I tell her no. It's just cargo that missed its delivery window. She doesn't understand the metaphor. Her English is good, but logistics terminology isn't something they teach in library science programs. I close the laptop without reading the email. She asks if I want more wine. I say yes. Here's what I've learned about money. It doesn't change you. It just removes the mask you've been wearing your whole life because you had to. When you're poor, you pretend to be grateful for scraps. You pretend not to want things. You pretend that sacrifice is noble instead of just necessary. When you're rich, you don't have to pretend anymore. You can just be who you are, and other people can be who they are too. Josh and Sarah were always going to be greedy. They were always going to see me as something to be used. The lottery just gave them permission to stop hiding it. And I'm grateful for that, because living with people who pretend to love you is worse than living alone. At least when you're alone, you know where you stand. Maria isn't pretending. She makes 30,000 euros a year at the library. She lives in an apartment that's smaller than my old place in Albany. She walks everywhere because she doesn't own a car. She's perfectly happy with all of this. When I asked if she wanted to quit her job after we got married, she looked at me like I'd suggested she cut off her arm. She asked why she would do that. She likes her job, likes helping people find books, likes the routine of it. I told her she didn't have to work if she didn't want to. She said she didn't work because she had to. She worked because she wanted to. There's a difference. That's when I knew I'd found someone real. The sun touches the horizon. Orange bleeds into the ocean. The fishing boats are coming back in, their lights starting to flicker on as the day turns to evening. Maria takes my hand. Her fingers are warm from holding the wine glass. She asks what I'm thinking about. I tell her I'm thinking about cargo ships. How I spent 25 years loading them with other people's belongings, making sure everything was balanced and secure and ready for the journey. How I never thought about what I wanted to carry on my own ship. I just kept loading everyone else's weight until I was so heavy I could barely move. She squeezes my hand, tells me in Portuguese that sometimes you have to sink a ship to learn how to build a better one. Her English isn't perfect. My Portuguese is worse. But we understand each other. The sun disappears into the Atlantic. The sky fades from orange to deep blue. Stars start appearing, one by one, like someone's turning on lights in a house you didn't know was there. Maria laughs at something. Maybe the way I'm staring at the sunset, like I've never seen one before. Maybe just because she's happy and laughter is what happiness sounds like. I realize I'm home, not just in Portugal, not just in this house with the terrace and the jasmine and the view of the ocean, but in my life, in my own skin, in a place where nobody wants anything from me except the person I already am. Money didn't change me. It just showed me who everyone really was. And that was the greatest gift it could have given me. The wine bottle is empty. The evening is warm. Somewhere down the street, someone is playing guitar. Fado music, melancholy and beautiful, and about longing for something you can't name. But I'm not longing for anything. Everything I need is right here. The sun sets into the Atlantic. Next to me, my wife laughs. I'm home.